Hi, everyone. Hold on, let me see if I can do this. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Happy holidays. I am going to be inviting Tamara Rubin from Lead Safe Mama. I'm so excited. So let's see how to do this. Okay, I just invited Lead Safe Mama. So I'm a big fan of Tamara. She's amazing. Her website is my go-to website.
Hi.
Hold on, there she is. Hi, Tamara. So lovely to meet you here in this way.
You too. Sorry, I'm adjusting my camera because it cuts off our heads, right? So
I know. I always have to figure it out. Like I tried to do it this time. I think I'm in the square.
Okay, wait, I'm almost there. Okay.
I wanted you on the top so everybody can see you. I guess you have to start it from your account or something. But anyways, I hope all is well.
Yeah. So you're in New York City? Is that where you are?
I'm in New York City. I know you're in Portland, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're at opposite sides of the states. How's everything over there? Everything good?
I think the kids are going to be excited. It's supposed to snow on Friday. So, for us, that's a treat. It doesn't snow very often here. So it's good.
I heard the whole country is going to be white.
Yay.
Well, so, yeah.
Things don't shut down here. Like when we moved here 20 years ago. And the climate has changed so much in the last 20 years, I think it was in 2004 and 2005, there were these giant ice storms that were completely unexpected because it was new, and the city had no idea how to deal with it. And so now we've got, some more experience dealing with these ice storms, but I grew up back east, and so I'm used to it. But it's kind of interesting to, hear the whole city shuts down with just a tiny bit of snow. So
it's funny.
It's different.
I mean, when I first moved to New York, I remember taxis swerving from one side to the other 22 years ago. I moved to New York, and now it's like barely anything in the city. The city gets very little snow now, and so it's very interesting to see the changes and how it's impacting all of us.
Yeah.
But I am so happy to finally have you here because I've been wanting to do this live with you for so long.
Yay!
Can you please share a little bit about your background to my audience? Because I know, your audience obviously knows everything about you, but
it's interesting. I don't know how much my audience knows about me recently because I have so many new followers, especially on Instagram. It's kind of like people just coming because they saw one thing about chocolate or one thing about I don't know,
something that connects to them. Yes. Yeah. But I'm happy to do these lives with you whenever you want because there's so much to share. I mean, I even watched your first live and I just couldn't believe it's never ending. So we could have, a series of these lives if you want. I thought for this one, we could focus on holiday because, everyone's going nuts. Like this week, we know very well there's going to be a lot of last minute shopping going on, like rush shopping, which is the worst. Like holiday rush shopping is like so stressy and like you end up buying a lot of crap because you're on a time crunch. And I wanted to really get your incredible input and amazing advice because you do like the work that I honestly wish could be highlighted more often for American families and even all over the world because it's work that it's so deep. You go so deep into testing products, old, vintage, antique to new products. And I am just so fascinated by your work. And I want to really focus on your holiday finds, maybe new ones or ones that people just keep going back to and they're highly toxic, these trendy ones that never go off the shelf. But so a little background on yourself and then let's dive into that holiday shopping.
Okay, and I have some props to share too. I'll have to hold them in front of my face. Yay. So for some background, the main piece of background is that my children were acutely lead poisoned in 2005. And what happened was, I squint if I don't have my glasses on, sorry. So in 2005, there wasn't a lot of information about lead poisoning available online. And actually, I had a background as a computer consultant, and I had previously created websites. And I decided by the time 2008 rolled around that I wanted to create a website about this work so that more people would have access to this information. So between 2005 and 2008, the time when my children were poisoned, to when I started really diving into advocacy work, I learned as much as I could about the issue, and I continue to learn every day. I learn new things, but the main thing I learned was that unbiased, science-based information is not available to consumers. And when I say consumers, I'm not just talking about tchotchkes and things in our home. I'm talking about our home. We are a consumer of real estate, as a tenant or as an owner, or as as a homeowner and or as a landlord, any of those things. So I just learned that there's such a huge gap. And then I decided to create a documentary feature film, which I did. And the film has music donated by The Who and Tom Waits. And then I cut in footage from my interview with Noam Chomsky. A lot of the young people here don't know who that is, but some of you do. And then I also, I did an event with Bernie Sanders. You're a Noam fan?
Yeah, of course. I have a feeling I'm a fan of a lot of your fans.
Well, I think for young people, young moms who might be watching, if they aren't a Noam Chomsky fan, look into his work. He's brilliant. I believe he's about 90 now, or close to that. And he's a brilliant thinker, one of the most brilliant thinkers of our time. And my interview with Noam was about, corporate corruption and the priorities of our government to favor corporations over individuals, and whether or not we as citizens have power to change how business is done and how people are protected from the actions of business. So it was a really interesting conversation. Anyway, that's in the film. And then I also, in 2016, I went to Flint and I did an event with Bernie Sanders, and some footage from that's in the film. And I interviewed.
Big fan.
I interviewed parents of lead poisoned children across the country. And so for anyone new to my work and wanting more about my personal story of my children's poisoning and some good background, please watch my film. I have it pinned for free. You can watch it in the Instagram highlight bubbles in my Instagram page, or you can go to Let's Say Mom.
Right now, I pinned your website and the TikTok and Instagram and your YouTube, which is all the same name. But did you film on your website? Because I didn't see it. Or is it on YouTube?
It used to be on YouTube. I took it down, and then because it's still officially not finished because of attacks on my advocacy work and the financial implications of those attacks. And so it's up there as a private.
That's gonna have to be another Instagram live for us, because I have that's a big question for me. Like, what was the backlash from the corporate world when you started to speak out on the truth?
I read on your website about the lawyer and Chevron, and
yeah,
I have thoughts.
I have a lot of stories, and I'm happy to share them publicly because I'm ready now. I've been laying low for a little while, but I'm going to be doing an Instagram live with Steven Donziger soon, and we're going to talk about the attacks of corporate America on people that speak truth to power and really just want the best for our communities, to keep them safe and toxic free. But also these corporations are committing, genocidal acts all over the world with our tax dollars. So that's a whole other.
Yeah. And so I have that chapter of my life as well. So I've been through that. So, my kids say, oh, Mom, you're officially a real environmental activist because you've been arrested. So, it's like, okay, great. But I'd rather not have had that happen. But, it's been over 6 years, and it's been a long 6 years. I'm right now in a lawsuit. I'm suing the state of Oregon in federal court for multiple counts of civil rights violations against me.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a big deal. So anyway,
please, we gotta talk about all that stuff on the side, because you have New York supporting you over here. So please, like, we need to continue that conversation. I want to know all about that case.
Yeah, I think, the state of New York is pretty good as far as states go. New Hampshire's good, New York's good, California's pretty good, Oregon sucks. I mean, Oregon's just awful when it comes to consumer protections and it comes to civil rights and it comes to human rights. It's a terrible state. But that's again, that's another Instagram.
I feel like we're gonna be doing like a series.
So getting to the meat of it, the reason I continue to do this, my baby was poisoned in 2005. He was 7 months old at the time. And basically they said he didn't need to be tested for lead because he was under 1. He didn't need to be tested for lead because we were white. He didn't need to be tested for lead because we were middle income. And I'm like, wait a second, what does lead poisoning have to do with my socioeconomic status? What does lead poisoning have to do with his age? What does lead poisoning have to do with the color of our skin? Nothing. Lead poisoning just has to do with mostly housing, soil, gasoline exposure, home renovation exposure, but also to some degree consumer goods exposure. Now, the interesting thing is, so he was tested, and that he's 17 years old now, and he has a permanent brain injury with a visual memory in the 4th percentile. And so I went from being a mom that wasn't a mom of disabled kids to a mom of disabled kids. And so for me, this is me speaking out as a mom of disabled kids. I'm going to be a mom of disabled kids until I die. Hopefully I will be able to set into place protections for my children for after I die. Because even when my younger son, who was also poisoned in utero, when he was about 6, my mom said, you need to institutionalize him. And I said, I'm not willing to institutionalize my baby. I'm going to be there for him. So my life every day and the life I've created for myself and the work that I do is around his needs and trying to make sure he has what he needs to survive each day, to get by each day, and to thrive to the best of his ability. And, I don't know if he's going to ever leave our home. He might kind of, they say the brain stops maturing at age 25, and there's a possibility that maybe by the time he's 25 he'll be where a lot of others are when they're like 18, so I'll be able to let him fledge. But at this point we're planning an age in place scenario where he will live with us for the rest of his life.
Wow.
So
that's huge. That's everything. I mean, you nailed it. As far as you're doing this for your baby, you're doing this for your family, and on a larger level, you're doing this for the country and for whoever is willing to listen, and you're just gonna fight till the end until these laws are put in place. It's unbelievable what I see on your website, Tamara. Like all of this greenwashing, and we could go, product by product, however you want to do it, but it's mind-blowing that our government is not prioritizing our children when it comes to toxins and our human health in this country. I mean, compared to Europe and other developed
well,
countries,
it's bad across the board. But someone just asked what poisoned him, and what poisoned my son was the work on our house. We hired a contractor to repaint the exterior of our home, and he did not use lead safe work practices. Oh, all my friends are chiming in here. Hi, Uganda. Hi, Katie.
I'm a little bit blind, so I usually take questions at the end, but I'm going through some of, lots of your fans are tuning in. How amazing.
Well, and friends,
and my friends too. But a lot of mama friends in New York, very concerned with a lot of things happening here. I have a really good friend, neighbor of mine, Christina, who's been poisoned. Her and her son were poisoned in New York City in a building that they rent from, and they're in a huge fight with the landlord. And it's a big problem because people rent, they don't know that they're renting a poisoned apartment, and then their whole life they have to deal with.
The consumer protections for tenants in New York are much better than any other state, I think. Maybe Rhode Island is comparable, Vermont and New Hampshire are good, but New York and also New Jersey has some new regulations that are excellent. So
but enforcing those laws is the hard part. That's what
And that's actually gets back to my story and basically why I decided to do this, because I decided that none of this information was getting to parents, and we as parents need to inform other parents so that we can protect every kid. So if you watch my film, like the closing scene of my film is, I want to do this. My goal is that every parent in America gets this information and every child is protected from exposure. I mean, that's the bigger goal. So we're going to take a step aside to talk about consumer goods, because that's what a lot of people have questions about.
But also, before you jump into that, I think there was a question about, okay, how is your child, you know, poisoned? But then also making sure that people understand here, and especially the ones tuning in now, is lead doesn't leave your body.
Yeah.
Lead is there. Once you're poisoned by lead, you live with it forever, and the health implications are very high, and you know they vary, right?
Yeah,
Tamara, they vary as far as
it's a smorgasbord of disabilities and health impairments, and you can't know what it's going to look like. And the main thing is that 90% of the lead that's in your body that you've absorbed is still in your body. It doesn't go. You might get, you know, some might be eliminated with cellular turnover, but your body holds on to it because it biomimics calcium in biological structures. So your bones, if you were poisoned when you're a baby and your bones are growing, your teeth are growing, your bones and teeth absorb the lead in the place of calcium, and your bones don't let go of that material very easily. So then when you have cellular turnover with an accident, like a broken bone, or with a pregnancy, you have high cellular turnover, that lead recirculates in your body. And so, you know, it's there, it's hard to get rid of. Unfortunately, there's a huge culture that's like a detox culture right now, where people go through these detox protocols and chelation therapy and IV chelation, and there may be some benefit to that. However, they do that a lot of times without removing themselves from the source of lead exposure and without identifying the source of lead exposure. So there's no point in doing detox when you can't, when you're continuing to get poisoned.
When because you can't identify where it's coming from.
Yeah.
I mean,
so a lot of people are doing these chelation therapies and ongoing detox work and continuing to be poisoned, and actually using the language of the detox doctors. If you're opening your detox pathways, I don't mean to say that so facetiously,
no,
but you know, if you
understand what you're saying. I mean, there's a whole trend with the it's so interesting that there's all these things that, you know, are there for us to do, but then we're missing the most important root of the problem, which is where do these toxins come from, so that, you know, we can permanently detox from them. It's like there's no reason, like you said, to have all these detox and plans or whatever programs if you don't know the root of the problem.
Right. And then if you're making your body vulnerable to being able to excrete toxicants, then you're also making it vulnerable to be able to absorb toxicants. So you're actually potentially making the problem worse. I'm not saying don't talk to a doctor about detox, but just be careful that the first step in any toxicant exposure is determining the source of exposure. And, you know, probably 95% of exposures these days is from older homes, from renovation, from sanding, from soil, and things like that. In New York, it's kind of interesting. So I have a permit to do home consulting in New York. So I go to people's homes. Yeah, and I come to New York and periodically, a couple times a year. And I did this really interesting experiment when I was there last. I went to a public park and I took some videos. I haven't shared them yet, but I filmed myself testing at a public park. And I thought, oh, look at this. It's gee, I can't remember the name of the park. It's Midtown. Oh, maybe not quite Midtown. It's a fancy little park. Anyway,
it's probably Madison Park.
No, is it Stuyvesant Park?
Oh, maybe it's Stuyvesant.
Yeah. Is that like in the 30s?
Oh no, that is, I believe that's Madison Park.
Well,
where all the buildings are and the Flatiron building is.
Yeah, it's near there. It's near there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the point is, so I went to this public park and I tested the railings in the park, the metal. It's like surrounded by maybe a 8-foot or 10-foot wrought iron wall, not wall, but, you know, fence. And I thought, oh, this is all going to test positive for lead. Well, it was really interesting. It was all negative for lead or very low lead. And so what that showed me, again, City of New York does a really good job. They actually went through and removed the lead paint from a lot of these public spaces. But then just across the street, like 20 feet away from this park that is in this fancy neighborhood, there's a private school. And the private school is in a former church building, or maybe there's a church associated with it. It's a little bit, there's a kindergarten, and then I think there's a elementary school. So it's privately owned, right? And the lead levels on the fence 20 feet away from the public park that were around the school and the kindergarten and the playground were incredibly high. I believe the levels were 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 parts per million lead. And with the knowledge that 90 parts per million lead and up is considered unsafe for kids. And so you've got this flaking, peeling lead paint around a very expensive private New York City school because it's private, so no one's regulating it. No one is making sure that that kind of public space lead hazard is removed.
Do you find really that perfect. Schools are very toxic in America?
Yeah. Oh,
in
yeah.
General? Oh,
yeah.
So I mean, bad that there's so much work to do. I mean, because the funding that you would need for these schools to basically detox them, like take all of that, you know what that's all about. And even that process of removing the toxins is so toxic. So it requires a lot of special machinery too for air purification and all that.
Well, so containment, like, you know, fully encasing the area and then making sure the surrounding area isn't contaminated, and making sure you're doing it during a time when children aren't present, which is a big problem. I see schools being renovated. People call me all the time saying, they're working on my child's school, they're doing window replacement during the school year. I'm like, oh my God, you know, why isn't this illegal? And then the other problem, and I mentioned this there was Joe Biden posted the other day about how they're removing lead pipes, and the other problem is that there's this kind of extreme misplaced focus on lead and water when the lead paint hazards are so much more significant in schools. And there's all this focus on getting the lead out of schools, but they're really just talking about the water delivery systems. And they're not even necessarily talking about every faucet, fitting, and fixture. And so we have, like, it's just, like you said, very big problem. So given how big the problem is, now that everyone's thoroughly overwhelmed.
I know it is an overwhelming topic, guys, so one thing at a time.
What I encourage people to do is focus on their home, focus on their interior spaces, focus on what they can control, because you can't control all these other things. So don't worry about these other things. Your kid spends most of their time at home, and then the rest of most of their time at school, and then wherever their favorite park is. Well, if you're going to go to a park on a regular basis, the quickest way to handle that is make sure to go to a space that's not in an urban setting if you can. Like, okay, so when you're in New York City, go to Central Park, go to what's at the top of the island? What's the cloisters, you know? Go to an open space that has no buildings right where the kids are playing, where there aren't going to be lead paint hazards. Try and stay away from those tiny little parks in the city that are surrounded by buildings and might have contaminated soil. Stay away from the parks that are right under a bridge.
Because
so that's
little kids put everything in their mouth, and that's the truth. They bite on things, they lick things. I mean, you constantly having to stop them from doing that. And if we live in a toxic environment, unfortunately, as parents, we have to be way more alert than we were in the past, I guess, when things were made out of wood and there wasn't any.
Well, and people say, you know, why is this a problem now? Lead paint was outlawed in 1978. Why are you talking about this now? Well, what's happening now is this huge movement for gentrification, renovation, repainting. So you're actually having more contamination coming from demolition and repainting and renovation. Or these buildings that were painted 100 years ago are deteriorating now more than they were when they were originally painted. So you have a kind of a new layer of problems. Again, I encourage everybody to watch my documentary because it gives a really good background on the issue.
I'm gonna because I have a bunch of friends actually that tuned in now that just are renovating and have renovated their homes, and I will tell them about your film, because I think a lot of the frustration is finding out about this information post construction. It's like you could still do things to solve what's happening. Like post construction, I would tell my friends now, please, like, make sure that you do an assessment of what's in the air inside your home, like clean out whatever you can for post construction. But I'm so excited to see your documentary. I didn't realize that you had a documentary. I'm going to be sharing that, and if with your permission, I could probably also post it on Instagram. I used to do that with filmmakers, especially on very important, hard to find documentaries. You know, I always get permission. But yeah, let's jump into the holiday madness.
So the thing you can do is you can protect your interior space and make sure that there aren't toxicants in your home. And whatever you can do in that area is something you can control and make sure that a large portion of your child's life, your family's life is protected, and you're not exposing them to toxicants where they spend most of their time. So that's why, you know, a lot of people say my focus on consumer goods is misplaced, but it's not really, because it, one, introduces families to the issue, which, you know, is an issue they might not otherwise be aware of, and two, gives them an opportunity to kind of start exploring the issue in a way that allows them to take action and gives them the tools to take action, and gives them things that they can easily address. So like replacing your dishes and getting lead-free dishes, that's easy and doesn't have to be expensive. And in fact, most of the lead-free choices are very inexpensive. The companies that sell the very expensive dishware are the ones that are more often leaded. Like this year, we tested some brand new Williams-Sonoma pieces. You look up Williams-Sonoma on my website, very expensive dishes, and those were positive for high levels of lead. But you can buy a lead-free glass dish at the dollar store for $1. You can buy a lead-free glass dish at Target for like $2 and at IKEA for $1. So you can replace.
Unbelievable. This is crazy. I honestly.
Well,
it just blows my mind, you know, because a lot of people, you know, they spend a lot of money, especially during the holiday, on all these like lavish dinners and like, you know, curating their homes with all of this dishware that's decorated, and really it's just a petri dish of toxins. And somebody just mentioned it's not just lead, and you talk about that as well, you know. And please share with us, besides lead, what are we faced with here, with what kind of cocktail of toxins?
Yeah, so for starters, somebody asked what I use to test. So this is an X-ray fluorescence spectrometer. This looks the same as something that people might use to test for lead in paint in homes, but this is a different kind of spectrometer. The instrument I use costs between $35,000 and $50,000 new, so you can't get one yourself. You need to be licensed and trained in using it. And it's not the same instrument that you might find on eBay for $7,000 or similar used. And don't ever buy one of these instruments on eBay, because you will have to pay $15,000 to have it refurbished and certified. So it's not worth it anyway.
It's better to hire tomorrow whenever she's near your area.
And I don't want people to just hire me. I like it when people hire me. It's exhausting though. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of emotional work. And I consider myself kind of a consultant than a therapist, like a home therapist, not an actual therapist, but I'm providing detox therapy for your house.
Give us the tools to do it ourselves,
well,
you know?
And the main thing is that I've created my website, which has over 3,500 posts and pages of information, so people can look up their items for free. You can go to my website, you can put Pottery Barn in the search bar, you can find all the Pottery Barn dishes that I've tested, you can look at the different years for the ones that I know the years of and the different colors, and you can say, okay, I have one from this year that's this color range. Maybe it's similar in a toxicant profile to this one that Tamara tested, so maybe I should consider not using it on a daily basis or not at all, depending on what you come up with. But there's also some tools on my website to help people search the website for different things. So
I'm always on your website. I get lost in your website. Like, I just cannot believe the products that I thought were toxic free. They're the ones that are the most toxic. There's a lot of greenwashing, especially with pans. I've had such a hard time with pans, Tamara.
Yeah.
Like, please help me. I have cast iron. It's like, but it's hard sometimes for me if I'm doing something quick. Like, I just, you know, it's heavy, and like I love cast iron, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I just want like an easy little pan to like whip some things up, and it just seems like the eco ones are not the ones.
All of these newfangled pans have this thing they call ceramic coating. It's not really ceramic. They've recoined or redefined what ceramic means, and for me,
it's a greenwashing term, right?
Yeah.
Tomorrow now, I feel like they're using it to greenwash.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're like, I've talked to a couple of the companies, they're like, well, this is our ceramic coating. I'm like, okay, my mother was a potter. We had a ceramic studio. I know what ceramics look like. I know what pottery looks like. And this isn't ceramic. This is a titanium based coating in most cases on the top of, on the surface of these pans. And the pans that have this titanium based coating, which is most of the nonstick green wash pans, also are on top of a lead contaminated, antimony contaminated aluminum substrate. So they're aluminum pans essentially with a titanium coating that they're calling a ceramic coating. And that's pretty much every brand. And if you look up Green Pan and if you look up Green Light.
I had before the cast iron, and now I'm just trying to find I have some good stainless steel ones as well, actually. But I'm trying to, you know, create my little set, my own little green eco set.
Yeah.
You can't find all the pieces sometimes with the cast iron. It's hard to find the saucepans and stuff like that.
Well, and I like the brand Solid Technics. One of my readers sent me one of those to test years ago, and they have a factory in Australia and a factory here in the United States, and they do a really lightweight iron pan that's not cast iron, it's pressed iron sheet. Ooh. And so it's like cast iron in terms of the toxicant profile, but it's much lighter weight and it's all made from one piece of material and it's much easier to use. So I try and search out those types of products and I list them on my site. So that's you know, there's choices on my website. I always say for your kitchen, have a mixture, because it's like with food, you want to have a variety of food, because if you're eating all of one thing and then it turns out that that thing's contaminated, then you can be poisoned. I worked with a family earlier this year where this little girl was switched by her doctor to being on a primarily cassava flour based diet, and she had lead poisoning because of the cassava flour, which is a post that I'm about to write about, because so much cassava flour is contaminated with lead. And the mother couldn't figure it out because she was on this healthful diet, you know, that her doctor had advised. And it turned out that that diet was poisoning her because it was based in one type of food. Well, it's the same with your pots and pans. If you have one pot or pan or type of pot or pan that you use on a regular basis, then it's more likely that that could cause you to have health impacts. So I say use a mixture of stainless steel, the highest quality you can afford, cast iron or pressed iron, and without any decorative elements, no enamel, no brass, no paints, nothing like that, just plain.
Huge one for my community, because I'm like, after I read that, because I went on your website and saw that whole thing that you wrote about with the enamel on the water bottles, you know,
yeah,
any kind of coffee mug to go container. I just, before reading that, I just got my kids new water bottles, you know, thinking stainless steel, this and that. And I let my kid choose a design. And now I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to make an art piece out of this or something, because I'm going to have to do all stainless steel, bare stainless steel.
Most of the water bottles made today aren't painted with lead paint. Some of the water bottles have leaded sealing dots if they're insulated water bottles. I think stainless steel is a good choice for water bottles that you're using for water, but not for other things. So if you're using it for coffee or lemonade or juice, you want to put that in glass. But it's rare that the exterior paint on a water bottle is leaded. However,
I bought my little kid and everything, but then I couldn't. Yours was sold out everywhere. I couldn't find the classic one.
Yeah, the home test kits, the alternate home test kits really don't work, and they'll give you false positives. And someone emailed me the other day. She's like, my paper towels tested positive. I'm like, oh, I knew she used this wrong kit. These home test kits just don't work. Unfortunately, they're a waste of money. Again, that's why it's good to message me on Instagram with your questions. Look up your products first on my website. Watch the little video that shows how to search the website, because I've tested so many products. You should be able to extrapolate based on the products that I've tested, which brands are safe, which aren't, you know, which things to use for which applications. I don't mind stainless steel water bottles for water. The other thing that's an issue is,
I realize the difference with hot. I should switch this coffee mug, only use it for cold drinks. Can you explain why? Because the heat,
yeah, well, it's the acidic nature of the coffee and the tea that's the problem. So again, I have a whole post on my website about stainless. No, it's fine.
so interested about this work. It's incredible, honestly.
It's hard to cover in an interview because what I do when I write is that I try and include as much science and as much links to exterior scientific studies as I can. So I just recently wrote this piece about stainless steel, and it talks about all the concerns for stainless steel and why there are concerns for stainless steel. Yeah, they also say I still choose stainless steel for some applications for my family. I just don't use it as a coffee mug. I use glass coffee mugs whenever possible. And, you know, if I have to use a stainless steel cup for my coffee because nothing else is clean right now or whatever, you know, okay, I might occasionally make an exception to that. But in general, I try and have acidic beverages only out of glass. But
yay, this 2023, I'm detoxing my entire life with Let's Save Mama. I swear. I swear. I can't wait to like document it and check in with you.
Oh yeah. And I'm fine too, you know, answering questions. I can't necessarily get to all of them.
Of
and
course.
I tell people, you know, Let's Save Mama is not a person, it's a movement. And part of the when you tag or post on my page or ask a question on my page, a lot of times somebody else will chime in with an answer because they've been following my work for 10 years or whatever, and they know the answers. And the answers are all on my website. So, you know, it's great that it's a community that's becoming more and more knowledgeable. I've had 1.6 million readers, over 1.6 million readers on my website this year, and they're all over the world, which is the cool part. You know, the most fun part is that it's people everywhere that are
so exciting. Tamara.
So I have some props here. We haven't talked yet about very many specific things, but you mentioned Christmas, so
oh my gosh, we all have some of those.
Yeah, and I hold on just a second. I was going to do some testing in real time here. I have a bunch of things in my queue that I'm planning on sharing about this week, and the things like this generally test positive. I don't have the test results for this right now, but they generally test positive for like 100,000 parts per million lead. 200,000 parts per million lead, cadmium, which causes cancers, and often in the reds and the yellows and the oranges. So, and people are like, well, it's on the outside of the glass. Why is that a problem? And the problem is because a child will put their hand on the outside of the glass, and then they might eat a cookie with that same hand, and they have just washed their hands before eating. But if this is older, which this is maybe, I don't know, 30 years old, or it's a Coca-Cola glass.
Yeah, those were so popular, and it's not just holiday, you know, little images. You know, there was cartoons, like all kinds of, you know, I used to collect those, and I ended up getting rid of them. But that's another question that I have as far as solutions. But those are really much very popular, and they come in all kinds of designs from the 70s, I believe, right?
What?
From the 70s. They're from the 70s. Right?
Well, they have them up through the 90s and even more recently. And
oh wow,
I have actually some on my website from 2000 that have high levels of cadmium. So if you go on the website, I actually have most of the cartoon characters. I have the Care Bears. I have Strawberry Shortcake. I
used to collect them.
Yeah. I have Garfield. I bought them at thrift stores, and then I test them and I post the test results on my website. So the frustrating thing for me is people say, oh, well, you have, you know, Wile E. Coyote, but you don't have Donald Duck or something. I don't know if my Donald Duck glass is positive because you haven't tested my exact design. I'm like, oh,
ridiculous. You know, that's ridiculous. People, same paint that they're using.
Yeah, it's the same paint. And so if they're from McDonald's, if they're from I don't know who else made them, maybe Burger King, I'm not sure, if they're Coca-Cola, if they're Pepsi, if they're collectible glassware. And the nice thing is I've been sharing about this work about the glassware being contaminated for maybe almost 14 years. And then in 2017, a scientist did a scientific study, scientist in England, Plymouth, England, where guess what he discovered? That these have toxic levels of heavy metals that are unsafe and they shouldn't be used. And so there's science supporting it. So I try and link that science on my website. So if you need support in communicating this to friends and family members who say, oh, well, that's just a blogger, that's just some lady on the internet, don't trust her. There's science. I mean, I'm using science, but there's more science by institutions that supports everything I say. I never say anything on my website that's not science-based. So that's an important one. And then I'm just showing you, I brought some.
Yes, show us.
A lot of people will recognize this.
Oh my gosh, yes. Is that the little, what is that? Are those the books, the little books?
Oh, no, this is ceramic. So
sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Oh yeah, but I know that brand. I thought it was a series of the, okay. Yeah, no, I know that's yeah.
It's
is it the Peter Rabbit?
The Peter Rabbit's also toxic. This is actually Bunnykins, which is different. Oh. And pretty much it's the same but different. Okay. And this is a piggy bank that I bought. I actually haven't tested it yet, but most of these are 10, 20, 30, 40,000 parts per million lead. And is a piggy bank a problem? Well, you know, it is, because this is probably transferring. I'm going to wash my hands after touching this, because this is from 1981. And people are like, oh, 1981, that's not old. I was born in 1981, you know, whatever. But actually 1981, they were still using super high lead paint on these items. And actually they were still using super high lead paint into the 2000s. I tested some of these similar products at 2008 production year as well. And from, I believe that was the Beatrix Potter one, but these vintage items, and this isn't a particularly good example. I just wanted to hold it up because everyone recognizes the Bunnykins information. The dishes are made of the same material, and I have several examples of the Bunnykins on my website. And in the dishes, these decor items are in the center of the food surface of the dish. And if you use it as your baby plate as a baby on a daily basis, and you look at that, either just look at it with your bare eyes or with a magnifying glass, you'll see how much of the paint has worn off of these items, especially ones that are
quickly and so easily. You know, even in the dishwasher,
yeah.
When these plates, you think of all of the chemicals going into your water, the soil, like, you know, you start to think, wow, where are these toxins actually going? Besides poisoning us, what else is it poisoning? I mean, it's really, and you know, I'm a huge a lot of my followers know I'm a big vintage aficionada. I love my vintage, but ever since I started following your work and studying your work, I've been removing all of that stuff from my kitchen. And now, of course, like, I'm like freaking out. Like, did I expose my kids to like heavy metals? And like, I need to like go down that rabbit hole now and make sure my kids are okay, my family's okay, that we're all okay, and we're testing, you know, in a healthy way, that we're not, and that we haven't been compromised. But all of that to say, it's like, you know, I guess I'll talk about the solutions with you at the very end, maybe, so we don't get, you know, sidetracked with our holiday chat of like the most popular items that you notice.
Yeah.
Because that's actually a question that I got a lot. You know, this holiday, you know, I would get all of these messages, and I feel bad. I should have done this Insta Live way before. But I do believe that this is, in these next few days, there's going to be a lot of like last minute shopping. So I just want to ask, what items do you see people gravitate to over and over again, especially during the holiday? Would you say it's like, you know, homeware, like plates and pans and things like that? Or have you noticed anything trendy really pop up that you're just annoyed that people keep going back to and not realize that it's highly toxic? Oh.
So I just bought this week at Pottery Barn. This one in particular is not incredibly toxic. This one has an unsafe level of lead at about 200 parts per million, which is over the 90 parts per million limit for children. But the main thing is that an item like this is not considered to be an item intended for use by children. So if we talk quickly about just the Christmas things and the holiday things, and again, I joke about it because people are getting Christmas advice from me. I don't celebrate Christmas. I'm Jewish. But so take it with a grain of way. You know, you know, you're getting skewed perspective. Like, oh, I get so frustrated that people are so focused on the importance of these types of items when they can be really contaminating and poisoning their family. I got another, before I get into that a little more. Whoops, hold on one second. So also bought this at Pottery Barn. And this has cadmium. Cadmium causes cancer. I'll be posting the results for that shortly. And then I got this at an antique store, I'm holding the top part that doesn't have lead, but this is all, you know, solid lead, and this is a little angel that one might put on the table for your Christmas decorations. And this is all, you know, solid lead on the edges, and a child is going to play with this, you know.
Of course, you know, kids, they touch everything. I mean, I have 2 boys, you have 4 boys, right?
Yeah.
They're like, they're discovering everything, touching everything, how it looks, how it feels, how it, you know. And I mean, to have things like this, like especially, you know, Christmas decorations, you wouldn't not necessarily think about it, but yeah, of course kids are gonna want to decorate the tree, and you know, and even just forget about Christmas, like holidays, like, you know, presents, all of the I'm curious about the paper, the holiday, you know, the wrapping of gifts, like that paper must be so tough.
Well, so the main issues with the holidays are
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, when I'm doing these videos, at least one of my children calls. It's kind of consistent. Because when you have 4 children, somebody's gonna call you. Hold on, let me just let him know that I can talk to him later. 1 second.
No worries, no worries. Take your time.
I didn't tell everyone.
I'm gonna look through while you're doing that. I'm gonna see if we got any more questions, because there was definitely people chiming in and saying, I'm annoyed. Someone says, I'm annoyed that no one makes good glass pots and pans anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I saw
There's
that.
another question from the same person that says, but how do we test blood, urine, and hair? That's, you know, I would like to talk about that, you know, at the end, solution based. And I know that we are way out of, you know, way over time. Most of my Instagram lives, when it's a topic like this, I go over time, yeah, because it's too important, you know. And I'm always like, hey, if there's somebody that chimes in late at the end, great, because it's so important to share this information and to have this awareness, because nowadays, you know how we are with this capitalistic world that we live in. It's like rush, rush, buy, not thinking what is behind this product, what is, you know, and also where did it come from, who did it affect, what did it affect, and how is it affecting me now. So yeah, I really think this is such an incredible and important and vital information for everybody, especially parents. A lot of parents don't know this information, and there's a lot of vulnerable families out there.
Well, and I think the most important thing to know, like I'm trying to, like you said, we could talk for hours and hours, and I have posts. I have a post about how to have a safer Christmas, and you know, things. It says the name of the post is something like, I'm going to ruin Christmas for you, but it doesn't actually ruin Christmas. It has tips for a safer Christmas. But the main thing to know when you're talking about decor is that that it's not regulated, because it's not considered to be an item intended for use by children. So they're allowed to have.
But that's I feel like that's just tricking families into getting poison and selling goods. I mean, of course it targets children.
Yeah. And so when I'm talking about decor for Christmas, I'm talking about artificial Christmas trees. I'm talking about Christmas lights. I'm talking about candlesticks, Christmas ornaments, all of those things. If you look up Christmas ornaments on my website, I've tested new ones and I've tested old ones. And actually this Pottery Barn one that I have right here is a lower level of toxicants than I often find. I have some that have super high levels of antimony, or they have lead paint on them. And this is not just vintage. This is also fairly modern. But there's also easy ways to have non-toxic ones. For example, Hallmark makes a lot of resin-based ornaments, and those Hallmark ornaments tend to be lead-free. So, you know, they're thinking that children are going to want to play with them. They have, and they're being very conscious about that. But anybody who sells something that has a Prop 65 warning, please, you know, really take that to heart, because a Prop 65 warning usually means something has lead or antimony or cadmium. And a lot of the manufacturers say, oh, well, we just put that on as a CYA, cover your ass. And, you know, they diminish in their marketing language the fact that they have to have a Prop 65 warning. But if it's a mass manufactured product that's sold in the state of California, then it would have a Prop 65 warning for most states that it's sold in. Conversely, if you buy something that's a mass manufactured product that doesn't have a Prop 65 warning and it's from a major brand, then it's actually possible that it doesn't have any toxicants in it, because they know that if they were selling that in California, they would get in trouble. So it's kind of a counterintuitive, but you want to look for things that are made by a major brand that don't have a Prop 65 warning. And sometimes you'll buy something in a store and there won't be a Prop 65 warning because it's like this ornament, you know, didn't come in a package. It was just sitting on a table. So it might not, it might have a Prop 65 warning on the website. So, you know, if you're going to buy something, look it up on the website to see if there's a Prop 65 warning there. And that's California's regulatory standard for noting whether or not something has toxic heavy metals or other chemicals that might cause cancer or reproductive harm. So it's a good benchmark. And again, a lot of companies are going to dismiss that. So,
well, I'm happy that California has these laws, because it affects, you know, consumer goods across the country and even internationally, if you will.
Yeah.
But there isn't enough states doing that, and actually should be a nationwide thing. And you know, we still have so much work to do. And I'm also, you know, I would like to re-invite you into having this conversation more on a legislative level, because I'm on the board of Clean and Healthy New York.
I saw that.
Who I just adore so much. And we, you know, I often talk about you in our meetings, because it's something that they constantly fight in Albany. You know, they're constantly fighting to push through this legislation. Like right now, there's a PFAS bill to eliminate toxins, the worst toxins, in apparel.
Right.
You know, in textiles. It's like textiles are the most toxic. You know, we don't realize when we wash it, we put it on our body, when we sweat, you know, also the strollers, all the textiles that you can think of, because we think, oh, textiles are just clothes or whatever. But no, it's everything in our lives.
Yeah.
You know, it's upholstery, it's strollers, it's everything.
Well, I want to, so I feel like I haven't answered a lot of questions, but I also want to touch on that real quick. So I'm wearing my tie-dye shirt that I bought the shirt. It's 100% cotton from, I don't know, Old Navy, which is probably, you know, not the best. But then I had a friend tie-dye it for me. And that's what I wear, is these Old Navy cotton shirts. I just say, you know, you can't win every battle, but if you stick with cotton and try and go with organic cotton whenever possible. And I know non-organic cotton farming is awful. I know how bad that is.
It has so much pesticides, you know, that's the other thing, that to grow cotton, it has to be, unless it's organic cotton. So yeah, there's so much. I mean, the apparel industry, all of the makeup industry, there's a lot. And you know, that goes into this festive season where everyone's buying fashion and putting on tons of makeup and all these toxic perfumes. You know, this topic is a never ending topic.
Well, and I wanted to, this is, and I just want to say then what I'm wearing underneath this. So my oldest child is 26 years old, 26 and a half. Okay. So he's old. And my youngest is 14. But when I was pregnant with him, I found this company. They're called Decent Exposures. They're out of Seattle, Washington. They make organic cotton. So Decent Exposures out of Seattle. They make organic cotton nursing bras. And I'm not nursing anymore. It's been, I don't know, 12 years, but I still wear their bras because they're super comfortable, and they custom make them. So you send them your measurements, and then they custom make you in the colors that you can choose which color fabrics. And they have non-organic fabrics, but they also have organic fabrics. So I always choose the organic fabrics, and you know, this is, I don't know if you can see, it's two-tone. It's purple on the inside and black on the outside. And
so great, though. That's so great. And that's part of my work, too, is being able to share resources that, you know, are local, family-owned, and that they're doing their best, right, to provide products and things that are non-toxic. And one of the companies that I really like is Pact, you know, because they offer organic, you know, like I said, like, you know, all kinds of layers, you know, like leggings, organic leggings, underwear, and they've gone a long way. It used to be made in the USA. Now I think because they've gotten so big, like most, you know, small companies, they grow and they go overseas for production. But I find that their cotton is so good. It's fair trade. It has like a million certificates, and it's a little bit higher, but it's still affordable compared to like all the other organic companies. Pact is still affordable. And I find, you know, I like talking about them. I don't get sponsored by them or anything. I'm just a mom trying products for my family all the time. And, you know, it's very hard to find these people that are doing the right things, these little companies that are doing the right things. And I remember when I heard your last live, you shared a little secret, which I hope you can share here, of that little store in...
They're gonna get
slammed. They're gonna get mad at you.
Wait.
But hey, business, and maybe just one person will contact them from this live.
Yeah. So what I was talking about, like, it's funny because in the graphic you put together as your key graphics for this talk, you had a picture of a child playing with a wooden toy. And so one of the things I've been talking about recently is avoiding painted wooden toys for children that might put things in their mouth. Now, if they're painted and it's a child who won't put them in their mouth, it's not as big a deal. But if a child's putting something in their mouth, the paint on most of the wooden toys, including the popular brands that are selling themselves as non-toxic, often have titanium dioxide in the paint, because that's the standard for most paint these days. And titanium dioxide was recently outlawed in Europe for food additive purposes. And now I'm hoping that they'll further look into this as a concern for the presence of a titanium dioxide at very high levels, 20, 30, 40,000 parts per million in the paint on babies' toys that are painted. So I want people to try and avoid painted toys for infants. And so I recommend, I have it's this one store.
So hard, as you know, with parents, especially now. I'm sure there's parents right now hearing our live that are like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Listen, my kids have painted toys, as we speak. And it's such a concern because for me, I buy everything used. I don't want to buy anything new. I don't want to contribute to new resources being taken away from the earth and hurting humans that are creating these things for us, for society. But, there is a consequence also to it's education, basically, right? So now I'm talking to you and I'm literally going to go home and review all the things they have. They have a lot of wooden toys, but of course, as boys, very well, they gravitate to the Hot Wheels cars, which I want to talk about that because aren't they super toxic? No?
No.
Oh, thank gosh. And,
yes.
And also like a big one that a lot of my friends have mentioned is like, Thomas the Train, like those tracks and those plastic, all my stuff is used or hand-me-downs, but I do want to be conscious because I want to hand that down to my cousin or my friends with kids. I don't want to hand them down something toxic.
Right.
So I have to do my personal research, but that's interesting. Like, so I'm so happy because some of the things that I thought were definitely toxic are actually not, like the Hot Wheels cars.
Yeah, actually, so most of the Hot Wheels cars that your kids are going to have been made in the last 25 years. Okay. Obviously if you bought them new, they're new. If they're older than like 30 years old, somebody probably has them in a collection as a, collectible, valuable thing. So it's unlikely that the Hot Wheels cars that you have circulating as a hand-me-down or secondhand are going to be those valuable collectible things. The other thing is that I believe, when my oldest was a baby, so 26 years ago, that's when I first started seeing incredible mass manufacturing of these Hot Wheels cars, right? Because you could buy them for $1. And so instead of giving my son food treats, or instead of encouraging him to poop on the potty with food, I would buy 20 Hot Wheels cars for $1 each, and I would keep a basket of them, and whenever he did a good thing, he'd get a Hot Wheels car.
Things are like hotcakes, like, honestly.
But the thing is, all of those more recent ones are non-toxic. Now, if you look, non-toxic from the perspective of being a toy for a child who is old enough to play with those toys. So the interesting thing is that the older ones can have lead and cadmium. What I tell people to avoid is if the wheels are rubbery and soft, that is most likely an indicator that it's an older toy. And those rubber wheels can have high levels of lead or cadmium. The newer ones in the last 25 years actually have hard plastic wheels. And so that's a really quick indicator that that's a newer manufacturer, Hot Wheels or Mattel, and those are generally safe. Hot Wheels or Matchbox, whatever the two ones are. So I really, yes, there are toxic Hot Wheels cars and Matchbox cars that are like 30 plus years old. And in general, it's not always the paint. It's often the plastic on some of those, where if they have a red plastic or a yellow plastic component, that can be high in lead or cadmium. But most of the
interesting, the color, like when you go through, when you break down the color on your website, that's so fascinating to me, because I had no idea. Now I know that red and yellow are hot, you know, mostly they have cadmium.
Cadmium, sometimes lead. Yeah, and so the fun part is when I'm at a home consultation, and if I'm like testing a child's toy and the kid's a little bit traumatized, like, mommy, she's gonna take my toys away. I'm like, okay, well, then I test the Hot Wheels cars and I say, guess what? These Hot Wheels cars have gold in them. And then they get really excited because most of the finishes of the Hot Wheels cars have gold in the paint at like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 parts per million. So that's kind of a cool thing for kids. It's like a reason for them to treasure them even more. Why it has gold, I don't know why they have gold. You know, maybe it's the sparkliness of it. Maybe it's the as in hardener or something. It's not like they're valuable as a gold item, but
I mean,
you know,
that's
it's a fun thing.
A huge toy right there. And Thomas the Train is like so popular. Like my youngest still plays with them sometimes, and we're ready to like hand them down, but I have like this whole section of hand-me-downs that I'm like, wait a minute, I need let's say, mama, I can't, like, I don't want to pass anything else on or donate anything that is toxic. You completely changed my entire like psyche on this. And it's interesting because it comes at a very important time for me, because I am starting to put together it's an initiative called Vintage for Change. It's really about using used items and vintage instead of buying new. But now with this extra knowledge, I'm going to be able to really, really like do something that is more conscious than what I thought of before. And Vintage for Change is an initiative that is going to raise money for specific projects and initiatives to eliminate toxins, and also for environmental justice projects that I'm involved in. But you know, what's the point of raising money for that if you're selling things that have toxins? So thank you.
Well, and the one thing I want to say, I'm just seeing what other, the other one thing I want to say is that a lot of the vintage clothing is not toxic. Clothing is the least concerning consumer good from a toxicant perspective in the end product to the user. Yeah, okay, there's, you know, toxic elements of clothing production over the years, but the end product, especially if it's a natural fiber, so silk or linen or cotton, you know, the end product is less likely to have heavy metals. Mm-hmm. Then the exception to that is things with buckles or sequins or glass beads. If those are vintage anything buckles, sequins,
shiny or lurexy or like, yeah. There's a lot of those kinds of vintage clothes from the 70s, especially, where a lot of shine and a lot of, you know, but it's what you're saying is what is worse is like the actual homewares, like, you know, selling of vintage plates that are decorated, because that is directly you know, or cups and things like that, because you're touching that with your fingers and your mouth, and that's the most concerning. As far as vintage clothes, you can get away with it a little bit, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. The problem I have that the line stops at fashion accessories. So, you know, obviously jewelry can be really toxic if it's vintage. Purses can be really toxic if they're vintage. Anything made of vinyl can be really toxic if it's vintage. Anything with crystals in it can be really toxic. Anything with brass. So, you know, when I think, I'm a hippie, so when I think of textiles and clothing, I think of cotton because that's what I wear. But I know other people wear other things. So if you want to,
well, yeah, now everything's synthetic, and that's kind of like also part of my work, is like really shining a light on synthetic textiles and fabrics that are hidden, you know, with toxins actually, and lots of PFAS in textiles now. But I always promote, if you're gonna buy new, go natural fiber, absolutely 100%. You know, because it's the least toxic, of course, and it has the least toxins, you know, if you go natural fiber. But it is a huge topic, and you know, but it's feels better to me that at least it's not as detrimental to your health than, like, you know, housewares and things that you use on a daily basis, like with your hands in your mouth.
Yeah. So getting back to what we were talking about earlier, if you want to eliminate toxicants in your home, start with your kitchen, because, you know, they're food pathways. So you want to make sure your cookware is the least toxic, and don't buy any of the hype from the companies selling stuff as non-toxic. It's all BS. And then it's almost all BS. I really think it's all BS. But so you know, have non-toxic dishes, and especially mugs. People don't understand how significant mugs can be, because it's funny, because someone said to me the other day that they felt like I had an overemphasis on consumer goods, and that there's fewer incidents of people being poisoned from their consumer goods. But there are lots of incidents of people being poisoned by a mug that is perhaps made in Mexico with leaded glaze, or made in Italy or Portugal. Those are like the 3 countries that make lots of toxic pottery.
And then high-end pottery is super toxic, and like people are like, oh my gosh, I got this made in Italy or made in France, and then you test it and you show us on your website that it's like actually way more toxic than the dollar store mug.
Yeah. And the thing about that is that even the European things, they might pass leach testing per current US standards at the time of manufacture, but it's what happens to those products after 10 years of daily use or 5 years of daily use. These surface glazes break down. So if there's any lead in those surface glazes, then there's a much higher likelihood that there's a potential for ingestion. So it's better to have lead-free glazes. How hard is that? Why shouldn't we be able to have lead-free glazes? Would you have purchased that item if you knew that there was lead or cadmium or antimony or arsenic in it? And so you know, starting in your kitchen is important, and then moving from your kitchen to whatever room in the house your child spends the most time. So if that's your child's bedroom, make sure your child's bedroom is safe, and that includes making sure the paint in the home is safe and the windows are safe. And
on the cribs and the bed, like, so this is really like huge, because I have an antique painted bed for my youngest. I know I tested it so high. So now I'm like, I have to change swap the bed out. And it's a beautiful antique bed. I don't know what to do with it now. I don't want to get rid of it, but it might have to be a decorative piece that just to look at, that is not in a room where everybody goes. I don't know what to do, you know, but again, like, these things are so eye-opening for somebody like me that loves to buy vintage and used, because essentially, like, my kid is sleeping on a poisonous bed, you know, even though it's gorgeous. Like, and so now I've been like doing all this stuff, and he's like, Mommy, what are you doing? Like you cannot touch this bed, like, until I figure out what to do, or you have to sleep, you know, in a different bed. But it's been, you know, an interesting road for me, particularly because reading your research and your studies and your work and everything that you are sharing with us on your amazing website, which anybody that's tuning in, please go on leadsafemama.com, because it is the best website on toxins, everyday products that you see now in the store, and also vintage products that were very popular back in the day, that, you know, you have like an attachment to because of memorabilia, and like, you know, everybody gets. And that's also the difficult part, is like, there's so many things that remind us of our childhood and you gravitate towards it, but actually you gotta check out her website first before you start buying all of the stuff, because, you know, you then have like a bigger issue, like how to get rid of it, which is also, you know, I read part of that on your website, and I started to think, what am I going to do? I'm going to make art pieces that are awareness pieces, hopefully. And I'm going to be creative. You know, maybe I decorate things like up high around, you know, in my dining area where like you can't touch it, but it's beautiful. Like hang the beautiful plates that you can't use anymore. Maybe there's a way to reuse it in an artistic manner that isn't going to hurt anybody, you know. And that's one of the solutions that I wanted to talk to you about, that I read on your website, And then there's solutions that you've mentioned even today on Instagram that I reposted from that there is ways that are, you know, easy ways to start detoxing the body. You know, you talk about garlic on your website. And then today, I think you mentioned chocolate. I don't know. I just want to talk about some solutions.
I was talking about the chocolate. Yeah, there was just a report about all the chocolate having lead. So
oh, I mean, gosh. Yeah. And there's actually a documentary that's coming out now called Chocolate Wars. And I think they're going to be talking about that as well. But anyways.
Sorry. No, what did you say? A documentary about what?
There's a documentary called Chocolate Wars that is supposed to come out. It's more about, like, you know, what really happens behind the scenes of these huge mega chocolate companies and how they're tied to child labor, child slavery. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they also talk about, you know, the toxins that, you know, the toxic environment in chocolate production. But I'll have to see when it comes out.
And again, even with, so the chocolate news that came out this week with Consumer Reports, it's important to know that all chocolate is contaminated. And so when you make choices for your family, the way you can lessen the impact is that you, again, like I said, you mix it up with, like, the dishes and the pots and pans. You have stainless steel, you have cast iron, you have glass. Well, you don't have only dark chocolate. Have it, if you have to have chocolate, mix it with something. Have it as part of something. Have, you know, chocolate pudding, chocolate milk, chocolate cake, you know, where it's mixed with other ingredients, then it's a lower body burden. But for the problem is that so many people are being told by their doctors to eat dark chocolate by itself. Dark chocolate.
Yeah, that's a huge trend.
And they're eating lots of it. And they're eating much more than what the current Confectioners Association of America says is the normal amount that an American eats. And they have set these standards for toxicity levels in chocolate based on this normal amount that is far below what people who are consuming it on a regular basis eat. So there is quite an issue with chocolate. And, you know, I mean, the simplest way, if you know you have a poisoned child, you want to not have any. If you don't think you have an issue, if you have no health impairments, if you haven't had a blood or urine test or a hair test that show that you are positive for heavy metals, then maybe you know, you can continue eating some chocolate. But I just want people, with everything, with dishes, with chocolate, with their homes, to go into it with open eyes and to look at the science and to understand the science and to avoid the propaganda. And the very frustrating thing right now is the candy industry themselves on their website say that they're a $37 billion annual industry. Well, that's even influencing, like, the NPR report that came out about the Consumer Reports data that just came out. They're saying, oh, well, you know, maybe it's fine and it's not that big a deal and you should eat the lower ones. I'm like, no, the lead in the body is cumulative. Cadmium causes cancer. As a population, as a human species, we're experiencing unprecedented rates of cancer. There's no way to greenwash and downplay the fact that these foods have high levels of toxicants. Other people are saying, well, there's, you know, there's high levels of lead in spinach and peaches and pears. I'm like, okay, no, peaches and pears, especially organic, are grown on the tree, aren't processed, aren't going to have high levels of lead. Spinach, yes, spinach is a phytoremediation plant that pulls lead out of the soil. So I don't let my children eat spinach. And my big treat when I go to a restaurant is I get spinach. That's like, I won't have it in my home.
Wow, smart. That's huge.
Yeah. So but read the science for yourself and then make an informed decision. As with anything, don't take anyone's word for granted.
People keep asking about that. It says, what specific blood test do we do for that, for lead? I've done most blood tests, but have never been told about lead.
Yeah, so it's a blood level test. And they don't usually offer it to adults. But if you are a woman of childbearing age, you can say, I'm considering conceiving, or you know, whatever you want to say. But, you know, that's the best. That's the best argument.
Restrictions for that. Why is there restrictions?
Funding from insurance because of lead industry influence on the blood lead testing industry. It's all industry
It's all
influence. So
connected. It's like the same old story.
yeah. So ask for a blood level test. Tell them you want a background. If you daily consume like a whole chocolate bar or half a chocolate bar of dark chocolate, that might be enough to say to your doctor, listen, I consume more than the average average daily amount of dark chocolate, and I consume one of the brands that was highlighted as a high lead and high cadmium brand in the Consumer Report study, and I'd really like to get a baseline of my heavy metals. So you can, in the state of New York, I believe hair testing is not sanctioned, but they do urine testing or blood testing. And I have posts about that on my website. You can look up urine testing. I actually went to a top doctor in New York City who did a urine test on me, and I published my urine test results, which was kind of interesting.
Was it Dr. Morrison?
No.
Sorry, I like sharing, but we'll keep it on the DM level.
No, no, it's all on my website.
Oh, good.
And the interesting thing is, he said to me that I had the best urine profile for heavy metals that he'd ever seen, that I was in the top 95, the top 5% that, of low metals. But when people see the test, they see I'm positive for lead. Well, I was born in 1969, so there's leaded gasoline in the environment when I grew up, and there was lead paint on my house, and I so I'm gonna be positive for lead, but it was at a level that's lower than most, even though this is what I do for work. So that was interesting. So a heavy metal.
So to recap, if you want a lead, because that's the thing too, it's like heavy metal testing is a little bit more complicated, right, Tamara? Like you have to do some individual testing. Like for lead, it has to be a lead test. Is that correct?
Well, they have heavy metal blood panels, and they have heavy metal urine panels, and separately they have a blood lead test. And a blood lead test is always good to have a baseline because it shows the amount of lead that's currently circulating in your system and is an indicator of recent exposures. And it's also good to have a baseline, especially if you're planning on getting pregnant, so that you know whether or not you're positive, and you have the opportunity to remove lead from your environment, increase your garlic, get other advice on detox from your doctor, in the presence of also making sure you remove any exposure sources. And it's important to have a baseline. If you have a baseline, if you have had a recent exposure, and then the urine testing is more considered to be a historical perspective. So if you do a provoked urine test, it actually is controversial because it causes the provocation chemicals cause the metals to circulate in your system so that they can be excreted in the urine and measured. Western medicine doctors have the concern that means that then they're bioavailable to be taken up through across the blood-brain barrier and potentially cause other health impacts. So it's controversial, but I think it's useful.
But so both are important though.
Yeah,
urine and blood.
Yeah, I think so.
It's like a map. You have to figure it out. You have to see like what these tests say. And on your website, you share those resources, like the resources that you have from different states that you are close to, I guess. Or maybe is there like a national one that you can like send your, I don't know, your urine? I'm so curious. But anyways, your website probably has a lot.
Well, the problem is that there's different regulations in different states. So basically ask your doctor I want to just take a step back. Make sure that children have a blood lead test, regardless of whether or not you live in a new construction home or an old construction home. Especially if you live in a city, if you have a blood lead test for your child, that serves as a baseline, even if it's negative, which we're going to hope it's negative, but it serves as a baseline so that later, if you expect or suspect that there was an exposure and you get a follow-up test, you can measure the change, or you can see if they're positive when they were previously negative. So it's always good to have a blood lead test baseline for your kiddos, regardless of any factors housing, school, socioeconomic, just none of that matters. Just get a baseline. And then
I will say one thing, like I did that test for my kids. Do you recommend doing it every year, once a year?
Yes.
Okay. And then I did the last test because we do it every December. And it's interesting. In 2020, we tested, all of us tested negative for lead, but we tested high in aluminum.
Okay.
And I was like freaking out, like, where's this coming from? And so I tested my water, I did everything. And then somebody, and it's so interesting, somebody said, Jada, do you have the Berkey filter? I feel like you have the Berkey. And I was like, yeah, we've had it forever. We have the big one, the Royal, the family one. But when we moved upstate, because we moved out of the city, we took our Berkey with us, but we left it, like I was gonna give it to somebody, because our home had a filtration system, so we didn't need the Berkey anymore. And little did you know, I couldn't figure out where this aluminum was coming from. I thought it was my pans. I got rid of all my pans. And maybe it was a combination of the Berkey and my pans, because I got the green pan, like totally greenwashed. Like I was one of those moms that got greenwashed into buying the green pan. And then come 2021 December, we were all clear. So I was very interested to ask you, like, did you test the Berkey? Because there's rumors going around that the Berkey has high aluminum content in their filters. And I know a lot of people use the Berkey, and I love that company. It's a family-owned company for California, I believe. And I would like them to know about this. Like, I don't know if they know about this, what's going on, but I thought to bring it up because we do test every year for our whole family. But I was curious about that for you, because sometimes you don't even think about these things, like, oh, the Berkey filter is supposed to be a healthy thing.
Well, I've tested the mechanism, like the unit, and haven't found toxicants beyond stainless steel. It's stainless steel in the units. But the problem is the testing I do is in parts per million, and the testing that I can do is primarily on consumer goods, not on the actual water. So when people have had a Berkey filter, I've just expressed caution based on the reading of their marketing materials that, and this is true with any filter, that you can't know if it's doing its job unless you have third-party independent testing or testing of your own water, showing your water before it was filtered and your water after it was filtered. So I think if you're going to rely on something as a way to live healthier, it's worthwhile to do your own testing of water. Now, the full metals panel for a water test is more expensive, can be like $270, something like that. Lead test for a water test for home.
Yeah.
A lead test is about $60 normally, sometimes less.
I heard in New York State, and I don't know about other states, I believe now you could get a lead test for free for your home. I believe my friend, I have to double check that, but that's a good thing to at least, I just don't know what kind of test it is, but at least that's an availability, an option.
The water
maybe
tests, the free water tests that are offered by the city or the county or the state, that's common. And those water tests, unfortunately, usually are limited to a low threshold of detection of 15 parts per billion, because the federal standard is 15 parts per billion. So the federal standard for tap water is 15 parts per billion. Below 15 parts per billion is considered safe. However, the federal standard for bottled water is 5 parts per billion, and they want bottled water to be below 5 parts per billion or it's considered unsafe. But the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that all water for use by children, especially in schools, should fall below 1 part per billion. So if you have water testing from your city that says negative below 15 parts per billion, it still could be 5 or 10 parts per billion and far above the level that's considered unsafe by the American Academy of Pediatrics. So I recommend always getting independent scientific testing.
Governments.
I mean, some cities and some counties might be testing down to 1 parts per billion with their free testing that they offer. Getting a free test is better than not getting a test. So if they've got the test, and so this is back to the Berkey filter and any other filters, like a lot of these filters say they filter out 99% of the lead. I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Well, if your lead coming out of your faucet is unusually high, for example, if it's 500 parts per billion and it filters out 99%, well, that leaves your lead in your water at 5 parts per billion, which is still 500% above the American Academy of Pediatrics level that is considered unsafe.
So it is worth like the investment. I mean, it's your health. Like, invest in testing your water, people. Yeah. Like at home, your filter, you know, it's so important. We don't realize, like, even the bath water that our kids like bathe in every day, you know, like and most bathtubs are also full of lead, you know, like yes.
Yeah.
We got so our families safe.
My kitchen sink is positive for 4 parts per billion lead. And when I filter it, it's testing negative for lead with a low threshold of detection of less than 1 part per billion. Okay. And because it's less than 1 part per billion, I'm happy. Okay. Because if you have 4 parts per billion, well, and you remove 99% of that, well, that's far below 1 part per billion. So it's all math and science. And I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I'm worried, or I have anxiety, or this is upsetting. And it's just like, for me, I always say, go back to science, look at the science, use science for your body, use science for your home, use science for your dishes, read the science. You are putting all this time and energy into choosing a car seat for your baby based on stats and science and all this information. Use that same amount of attention that you put into choosing that car seat put that same amount of attention into toxicant concerns, into every other thing that you use on a regular basis. And it's not like you have to keep redoing this.
Exactly. It becomes second nature after some time. Like for me, when I found you, it was overwhelming when I read your website, but I was so grateful that it existed and that I was just on the road. You know, I was on the path to shifting and changing these things. And actually it's like helped me change my whole business model in a way for my initiative that I want to do. So thank you, because it is all about education and don't get overwhelmed. It feels overwhelming at first, but I always say about change, start with one thing at a time. One thing at a time. Just breathe through it, go through your kitchen, then move on to the next room. Then, check that box one at a time.
Yeah. And I think as a general rule of thumb, and this might be frustrating for some, is avoid highly decorated things. Avoid highly decorated cribs. Why isn't a bare wood crib okay? Avoid highly decorated toys. Get natural toys for your kiddos. Avoid highly decorated cookware and dishes. Decorate your table with your food. Put that energy into, those things. And I think that there was one other thing I wanted to say about the chocolate conversation, and that,
because, I misunderstood. Like I thought the chocolate was, but it's a big topic for, especially now that everybody's buying chocolate, so much chocolate. There's different, commercial holidays that, even Halloween, like all of that. I mean, yeah.
Well, and part of the problem is if you look at the Consumer Reports summary, all of the 28 brands they tested were positive for lead. And the problem is that you have choices. You can either not eat chocolate, you can advocate for legislation that protects consumers and has stricter limits for toxicants in chocolate, or you can eat chocolate, but with an informed perspective and eat less of it. The problem is that most of these brands are greenwashing by trying to tell you that they are healthier options. And then doctors are almost prescribing these as a detox, or because it's supposed to have antioxidants and all this stuff, when they're not looking at the flip side, because they're not actually present to it. And then one other thing is, I got an email last night from a reader. She's like, I don't understand. I've been taking bentonite clay every day, and you're telling me it's toxic. I'm like, yeah, who's selling you the bentonite clay? People who are making money selling you the bentonite clay, who are trying to diminish the fact that this bentonite clay has high levels of lead. They're citing fake science. If someone cites science and doesn't give you a link to an actual scientific study that says that something is safe, or that,
then yeah, don't believe that.
Yeah, believe them. And the problem with bentonite clay, which a lot of people take as a detox agent, is that there's this false report out there. It says it's an aggregate study of, or an aggregate summary of a bunch of different data. And when you look at it, it actually isn't a study, but it's on some medical website. So people think it is a study, and they don't dive deep into.
They don't go deeper, and that's the problem with our society today.
Yeah.
We have very short attention span, and everything is too overwhelming to research. And it's we got to get back to that. Get back to the core, get back to researching in order to protect your health and your family's health and your community's health, and speak on these things. Like, oh, I heard, just even sharing, oh, I watched this IG live today and I heard about this chocolate, I gotta research about this. What companies, and the thing is, right now we have people that are probably wondering, okay, well, it's the festive season. I want to buy chocolate. So what chocolate would you recommend? Is that on your website too? No, you're not. You're like boycotting chocolate altogether.
So in my post about my overview post about chocolate, I recommend avoiding anything that says sustainably sourced, anything that says fair trade,
organic. It doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, any of those buzzwords that might. And I've got my chocolate overview post, you can read it. But any of those buzzwords that might indicate that it's made on old world equipment in a third world country where they don't have stainless steel processing equipment for food or similar.
That's so much sense. Yeah, that's where it's coming from. It's all the old machinery.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, the NPR article and all these people defending chocolate, a lot of the people who are other bloggers and stuff defending it are citing, oh, well, NPR said it's in the soil, or people said it's in the soil. Well, the reason it's in the soil is because they're still using leaded gasoline in these third world countries where they're growing the chocolate. So it's not like natural soil level contamination. It's not that at all. It's contamination from leaded tractors and leaded gasoline and leaded containment measures, and it's not natural, and it can be reduced. So for me, if I'm going to consume chocolate, one, if I choose to consume chocolate, I don't worry about it. I limit my chocolate consumption significantly. I like white chocolate because it has fewer toxicants. It's not really chocolate, so it doesn't count, I guess. But then if I'm going to choose chocolate, I buy the least processed possible chocolate product that I can. And for me, that's roasted cocoa nibs that are made locally.
Okay.
So it has been processed the least amount, because the more processed it is, if it's ground, if it's turned into a paste, if it's, whatever, then if it's turned into a bar, the lead is added at every step of the way. So, I learned to make my own chocolate treats, and, I don't do that very often anymore. It's interesting because people are like, well, how do you avoid these things? I'm like, I just do. You just don't do that.
Start to slowly wean yourself off of these things that we love so much. Like now, I don't know if my husband is in the thing. I have to check, but he's like, this is gonna hurt him so much because he's a vegan, and he loves dark chocolate, and he's always trying to find like the best, or like the most like cruelty free, like everything, like all the certifications you can think of. But the reality is, now we live in a world where when these things come to the surface, we have to be realistic with ourselves. And like you said, don't beat yourself up if you're going to have chocolate, consume it in, like very little, or be creative, like mix it with things, create your own, find an amazing friend that's a baker that maybe can help you make your own stuff. But it is a hard topic, because even like trying to find the raw chocolate to make your own is difficult, because it's right. Like it's not, even if it's not
so
highly processed and you just are looking for the raw ingredient, it's still a problem. So yeah.
My husband's also a vegan and also a chocoholic. And the main thing I tell men is that and he just found this company, Hue Chocolate, which I had never heard of.
Oh yeah, I know Hue. Yeah.
And they're one of the highest lead levels chocolate out there. They're like
we sometimes. And actually, there was something here that says, is it, someone said something about a lawsuit with Hugh?
I know there's a lawyer, a law firm that contacted me yesterday. And I have a couple more posts.
Are we going to take legal action collectively against Hugh?
So I think that if that's Jen, I think there's a woman named Jen who's been asking. A lawyer did contact me yesterday and PM me, and I'll put you in touch with that lawyer. I told that lawyer I need to finish the writing I'm doing because I don't want the writing I'm doing influenced even by a lawyer. I want it,
It is Jen.
Yeah, okay. And so yeah, PM me. And if anybody who has questions about this chat, PM me, and I'll try and get you the links that I talk about. Like I said, I have links to everything that I talk about on my website, which is leadsafemama.com, and in it I link the science behind it. And the frustrating thing for me is I've been talking about lead in chocolate since I filmed the scene for my movie in February of 2012, which is,
wow. 10 years, yeah.
10 years ago.
Wow.
I started talking about lead in chocolate. And I know you've watched my film if you come away horrified that there's lead in chocolate, because it's the last scene of the film. So I know you've watched the whole film because it's the final scene in the credits. And it's an interview I do with an EPA employee who's also a professor at Harvard. It's not, the words aren't coming out of my mouth. They're coming out of, I thought someone just said, I thought it was pronounced Hugh, but it's not, it's pronounced Hugh. I heard I listened to an ad from Hugh Chocolate the other day. But anyway, so, you make these choices, and my husband, I was saying, my husband's like a huge chocoholic. And then I found out that he'd been buying this, and my son bought it too. And I'd never even heard of the brand, and they were both buying it. And what I tell men, whenever there's a lead question that they don't want to believe, is that one of the primary impacts of lead exposure on men is erectile dysfunction. So you make that choice.
Wow. That's huge. You just blew my mind. I'm going to be totally sharing that very important piece of information.
Yeah. And there's science behind it. We joke because, we're talking about penises, but it's important because it's about reproductive health. It's about continuing the human race. Well, there are studies that show that we're losing our fertility as a race. And there are studies that show that the biggest problem by 2050 for humans, which may not be a problem because, we're a parasite on this planet anyway, but the biggest problem is going to be a loss of fertility, significant percentage of loss of fertility by 2050. And a huge chunk of that is caused by lead. And the other thing that people talk about, which I think is important for you to know, given you're talking about the PFAS and other things, is that Dr. Leonardo Trasande, who is a scientist, researcher in New York City, who was with Mount Sinai and now is with NYU, did an economic impact report in 2011. This is linked on my website, showing the economic impact of lead on our children, and his numbers that he came up with, and toxicants of all poisons, toxics on our children. And the numbers he came up with were conservative because they didn't go into a lot of the peripheral costs, and I cover that in my film. But the number he came up with was the total economic impact in 2011 of all toxics combined on the health of our children is $76.6 billion annually. And again, that's just the United States. And of that $76.6 billion annual impact on the health of our children, 50.9 billion of that is lead. So 2/3 of the economic impact of toxicants on our children is lead. And then all of the other chemicals combined are 1/3. And people think,
yeah, I had no, wow, that is a huge finding. And why don't we hear about this more?
That's why the name of my film, somebody asked the name of my film, is Misled, America's Secret Epidemic. It's because the industry influence of the lead industry on all of our sectors, on the press, on the medical industry, and the insurance industry, on the EPA, the impact of the lead industry across the board on production, on toy manufacturing, on everything, on regulatory standards is so significant that they've done a really good job of keeping it out of the media, how significant the impact of lead is on our life. So given, not saying that this 25 billion-dollar impact of all these other chemicals combined isn't significant. That's mercury, that's PFAS, that's BPA, that's all these different whatever things that you want to talk. That's all those other chemicals. But lead is twice all of those chemicals combined, and it's twice as, or not twice, it's so much more pervasive because it's in our homes, it's in our dishware, and it's not being regulated in all these things. And yes, there is lead contamination in food, but it's not what people want you to think it is. Most of the food contamination, of the lead food contamination, is coming from manufacturing and processing. So the best thing you can do for your family is eat as much minimally processed, unprocessed, raw foods as possible.
Living foods,
yeah.
people, because we go in the supermarket and it's all dead food.
Yeah.
Go to the produce section, of course, but if you look around at all the aisles, you're just buying dead food.
Right. And so, that's not actually hard. If you don't cook a lot and you eat a lot of raw food, it actually is an easier life as a parent. So for me, what that meant yesterday is I gave Charlie a sliced apple. I gave him celery sticks with peanut butter. I gave him cherry tomatoes. The snacks at our house are constant fresh vegetables and fruit. I
mean, now parents do all these like baby pouch thing, the pouches, which are, who knows what's in those. Like, I know that I think you also have things about that, but like all the to-go baby food is so concerning to me. And because all you have to do is look at the inside. Like, once you open it up and you start to see like what it's made out of, the packaging.
Well,
and
I have the post I wrote about peanut butter in plastic jars, and that's a very popular post on my website. The concern is that there is antimony in the plastic packaging. I haven't tested the baby food pouches. I need to do that. But a lot of plastic packaging has antimony. Antimony is a known carcinogen. Antimony was only added to the known carcinogen list in December of 2021. So yeah.
Oh my God.
And it has comparable physiological impacts to lead.
Wow.
So yeah,
I'm mind blown, Tamara. You're just a fountain of such vital information for everybody, but especially mamas and parents out there that are trying to keep their families safe and their kids safe from neurotoxins. They're still developing their organs, their brain, they're still developing. And if we're, filling them up with toxins because we don't know any better, we're faced with a, concerning future. So, thank you so much for all this incredible information. We've been on the live for so long, but it doesn't matter. Like, the way that a lot of my friends and community and audience works is that once I post it, they watch it at their own time. They always tell me they pause it, they revisit, they play, it's a great source of information that they could always tap into. And again, like, Tamara has a YouTube, TikTok, which I believe I'm not a big TikTok person, but you're popular on TikTok, right?
Well, what happened was I had one video that had 2 million views in 48 hours.
Amazing.
But then I reported this baby bottle company for having lead. And I'm pretty sure that this baby bottle company
did something.
They reported me on TikTok and said I was bullying because I was reporting that their product had lead, and TikTok took my profile down. So I have an alternate TikTok now, Let's Save Mama 2022.
God, I'm sorry that happened, Tamara, because I was so excited that, because I don't know what, I saw something like, and maybe it was that, like the TikTok one that got a lot of viewing, and I was so happy. I was like, yay, TikTok is like a younger audience, like she's getting all this action over there. And I'm so disappointed that TikTok did that.
Yeah.
Because it shows the power that corporations have over individuals like us who are just trying to share information, like a mama like you that has had to go through her own child being poisoned, and just wants to share this information with the world. And here you go, like Baby Bottle Company takes down, the opportunity of your important educational videos to go viral.
Yeah.
And it kills me, but I love your resilience that you started another account. Yes. And we're gonna help spread all these messages, please, whoever is here with us right now, spread this information, tag people, forward this Insta Live. It is so important what Tamara's work is. It's just vital. I can't stop saying it. I know I'm being repetitive right now because I keep seeing people chiming in, but it's so important. It's all on her website. Like Tamara said herself here, you can contact her directly with specific questions. And, you know, I'll be doing this again, hopefully with Tamara, because there's so much to cover.
Yeah.
And again, you know, we're here trying to like just really make sure that we keep our community safe, especially our families and our homes. And we really hope that you learned a lot. I certainly did. I'm constantly, because of Tamara, I'm constantly changing things or seeing things differently from a different light. The last thing I will say is, I know you, Tamara, have these special gadgets that help you determine very serious toxins for people like us that just want to know what, like, you know, because I'm sure that our audience that has heard us today wants to do something right away and test things right away. Like, what would you suggest as far as that? Because that's hard too, right? Like, the tests are out there, aren't reliable. Like, you know, I found one that was very close to the one that was sold out. I looked at all the reviews and everything, but how can you steer us in getting somewhere with this?
Well, I don't have good answers for that, unfortunately. So the 3M test kits were designed by a woman who was trying to make sure she had a kit that would identify lead in paint with the 1978 ruling that paint needed to be below 600 parts per million lead. So that 3M test kit, the lead check swabs, test down to the threshold of 600 parts per million lead in paint. Now, it primarily works on house paint, and it doesn't work on all enamel paints. And it might work on your bathtub. And I have a list of, I have a website category in the menu bar of my website. There's a tab that says lead testing, and under it says, you know, home test kits, and it has a list of things you can test with a home test kit. And then it has XRF testing, and it has a list of things you should test with an XRF instrument. You really can't test most consumer goods yourself with a home test kit, and that's why I've created my website. That's why you have the
website you do.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's not the answer people want to hear. If you send something to a lab, it generally can cost like between $70 and $300 to get it tested if you have like a consumer good. So it's usually not cost effective for folks to send things to a lab. And so instead, what I do is my readers send me products that they want tested, but they pay like a nominal fee. It's $35, and they help cover the cost of my testing.
Oh,
and
like, no, thank you for sharing that. That's huge. Yeah. That there is a solution for you all, and you can directly. I mean, that's a very small fee, Tamara, to like really help people out there who are really trying to get to the bottom of this. And there's I think we should take this last question and then we should wrap it up because I feel so bad I've taken so much of your time. It's called, here it is. Have you tested Love Very toys by any chance? Sorry.
Yeah. I have, and they are, and the other Instagram Live I did with Non-Toxic Mama Bear, we've really focused on that. Where this conversation's gone all over the place today, but
I know it's very like my Instagrams. I'm sorry, but like it's just so much. Like no. I want to know it all, but I know it's hard.
Yeah, so I've tested those toys, and they are. They do have titanium dioxide in a lot of the paint. So I encourage people to avoid the painted wooden toys from that brand for children who are putting them in their mouth. And not all of their toys have titanium dioxide based paint, but a lot of them do. And if you have questions and want to understand that issue better, put titanium dioxide in the search bar at the top of any page of leadsafemama.com. And I have a very long article that links to the science and discusses the new European regulatory standards as that relates to toys. It's not illegal what they're doing, and that's the
problem.
Yeah,
that's the problem. Yeah, we have to get these companies regulated, and it needs to be a national. There needs to be a national bill that protects us. But again, this is a continuing conversation. I am so grateful to you, Tamara, for all this time shared with us. I hope that you all play this over and over if you have to, or do it in sections because it is a long live, But again, extremely important, extremely educational. And I just want to thank you, Tamara. Please follow her website, her Instagram, her TikTok, her YouTube, and get educated, because we all need this information so badly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tamara. And I hope to see you very soon. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.